Welcome to the Real Board Loft. I'm Trip Foreman, and this is the LibTech Lost Puddle Jumper. We've been getting a lot of questions about this board online through our comments section, so I want to address those right out of the blocks on this review, about the shape and the differences compared to the standard polyester board, about the construction compared to the standard poly, and then also about the fin system, because LibTech has their own fin system in this board. So first we want to talk about the shape. You're looking at a puddle jumper. This is a 511. And you can tell the big difference in this board compared to the standard board is the wings in the back of the board here. The standard puddle jumper is a little bit wider, about 1/4 of an inch wider, size per size, and then comes down and has a hip right here that goes to a squash tail. This board is 1/4 of an inch narrower, but then carries that width further back and then steps it down with this wing right here to the same size tail block. So on a lot of winged boards, you would think that the wing is going to step the tail block down to a narrower width. On this board, what it does is it carries that width further back and then steps it down to the same size. So board per board, if you're looking at a 511 per a 511, this board right here is going to be wider right here by a little over 1/2 inch wider right at this section, and then it steps down to the same size tail block. So conveniently, we have a 511 puddle jumper right here, and you can look side by side at those boards the full length. Like I said, this board's about 1/4 of an inch wider at its widest point, but this board carries that width further back, stepping it down, and then the tail blocks are almost the exact same width. And tail block is actually what the board is resting on the carpet right here, and they're both the same width at the back of the board. So that's the main difference. What that does to the board, keeps it a little bit narrower in the middle of the board, makes it go rail to rail a little bit faster. That longer straight rail line gives you a touch more drive, and then by tucking it in here to the same size tail block, it'll give you relatively the same top end on the board. It's a little bit more dramatic of a drop in the width right here at this wing, and what that does is it just gives you a little bit harder pivot point to crank off the top of the wave. So those are the main differences. They're all subtle, but when you look at the photos and the video of this review, you can look at it a little bit more closely. The next is the construction of this board. A lot of people, when they see a production series board like this, they get up on their heels a little bit and they're like, "Oh, is it corky? Is it corky?" Because everybody thinks back to the original Tough Lights that Surftech made. One of the things that we found about surfing this board is that the LibTech construction has a very damp feeling to it, and damp in a good way, meaning it absorbs vibration, whether it be wind or chop on the face. This board absorbs vibration much the way that a PU core, a PU poly board does, and it is by no means at all chattery or bouncy. If anything, it really sticks down to the face of the wave and has a really damp, soft feel on the face of the wave. The other question that's real popular is sizing of the board, because when you have anything different than a poly, the question comes up, well, how do I size it? How do I size it? And the volume and the float of the board is always based on the displacement of the board and the weight of the board. So if you have equal displacements, the lighter board is going to float higher in the water. And this board is a little bit lighter than the standard poly, so it will float a little bit more, not so much more that you're going to jump down to the next size, given that they're 2-inch increments, but it does have a touch more float. And what I would do is just take that as far as extra paddling, extra glide across flat sections, but I wouldn't take it as something that gets inside your head and starts messing with your decision, because if you jump too far down in it, you're going to end up not liking the board as much. So a touch more float, and that's really not as much based on the construction of the board as it is the weight of the board. So for example, if you took a poly board and just built it lighter, meaning like you used a lighter foam blank and a lighter glass schedule on the board, you could achieve that same weight to volume ratio and get the same float. So that should clear up the confusion on that one. Last thing is the fin system. This board has the LibTech fin system, which is an adjustable 2-tab fin system. And so adjustable meaning that it does have, you can move the fin forward and back and either close the fin cluster up or closer together, or open it up to adjust how the board rides. Talking a little bit about that, whenever your fin cluster is closer together, that's going to make the board turnier and more maneuverable. Whenever the fin cluster is further apart, it's going to make it more confident and higher speed turns and better for drawing out long radius turns on bigger waves. So that gives you a little bit that you can play with to adjust the turning of the board based on the conditions that you're in. The other thing about this system is it is, when you see a system, okay, it's the LibTech fin system, a lot of people will immediately think, well, I have to use LibTech fins with it. This fin system works really well with the FCS, the original FCS 2-tab, so not the FCS 2 fins that are toolless, but the original FCS 2-tab fins. Myself, I had a set of Mayhem 5-fin set in my garage, so that was the fin set that I put on for the trip to El Salvador. And these are 2-tab FCS fins. They go right in the box and they screw right down. And then again, you have a little bit of adjustability to close the cluster or open it up. The one thing that I will say is that the screws that are in the LibTech boxes are LibTech screws, and they're a little bit bigger female opening in the head, and so you want to make sure that you use the LibTech fin key that comes with the board so that you make sure that those screws last a long time and you're able to switch your fins back and forth a lot. In a jam, you can use the FCS key. Second choice would be the Futures key, because the Futures key has a slightly smaller head on the key itself, which if you use it again and again and again, you might strip the screw out. Not the screw going into the board, but the actual head of the screw. So the LibTech fin key is the best choice for this fin system. So surfing the board, just got back from El Salvador and had, basically the best testing session that you could possibly ever hope for on a board like this, which was a softer, long point break, and so some of the waves were upwards of 300 yards long, and you could really get a feel of not only the board but also tuning the fin setup, whether it be like the cluster on the fins or switching fins altogether or switching setups on the fins. And every wave basically ended right where we were staying, so I could just run in and switch the fins out. So with the fin system, what I found is that I went first for the thruster setup, which is what I was riding my standard puddle jumper with here at home, and like kind of shorter, punchier beach breaks. And I felt the thruster was a little bit slower on that wave and on this outline. So I switched over to the quad, and immediately the board just took off out of the gates and was noticeably faster, a lot less drag on the board, and just you could just tell the board just took off. It was just a lot faster down the line. One thing that I noticed is on the set waves with the quad is that if you're just absolutely flying and you went to bring like a big roundhouse back around into the pocket, it would get hung up at right when you're just trying to stick it back up onto the lip, and adding a nubster right here really helps that. So basically the board would just get flat and stall and not want to get up on the rail. And this was like at the top end of the board. So adding a nubster there, I found that trick out on my Lost Couch Potato. In some of those high-speed wraps, it would almost flat stall and just kind of take its own line. And the putting a nubster in there definitely helps. And the FCS nubster works in here really well. So we tried it thruster, we tried a quad, and then the other one that was real interesting, and I got this off of using the Werner double barrel shotgun, which also has a big wing right here, is I tried it with an FCS MR TFX 20 plus trailer, and that's got a big set of more vertical twin fins here, and then a little tiny trailer fin here. And what that did is it gave you almost the speed of a quad, but a real pivot like what the thruster has that you could really lever off of with your back foot. I was riding all these waves backside, so really being able to push hard on your back foot and wrap it back into the pocket was better on the thruster and better on that twin plus trailer than on the quad. The quad was, like I said, lightning fast, but having that twin plus the trailer was a good blend of both of those fin systems. So if you're a 20 fan or if you have those fins, that's going to work really well in this board. Let's talk a little bit about the performance of the board. From a performance standpoint, this board basically, we had a smaller week of waves, so it's anywhere from about waist high to maybe a foot overhead. And this thing handled the whole gamut, not only on that point, but on some of the hollower days as well when we boated to other points. The board's really easy to paddle, to get into waves. It's real forgiving getting up to your feet with the extra width. One thing that I did notice about this board is it really likes to have your foot on the tail pad. So if you're comparing it, let's say, to like an RV or a Lazy Boy, the RV or the Lazy Boy has a longer sweet spot, so you can kind of almost be anywhere except for right on the nose. This board really liked your front foot and, back on the board and your back foot on the tail pad. And so I found myself, a lot of the times either, here or here, obviously, which is where you want to be surfing. But once I got off the pad, the board noticeably slowed down. And so you want to have your foot on that pad all the time. And it really takes off. Like, it's a noticeable increase when you get yourself on that pad. So if you're looking at this board versus one of the other ones, this one's definitely going to like your foot all the way back all the time. It had a great down the line projection, really good speed, good glide as long as your feet were in that position. And this wing, once you got tuned into the wave and you got your fin set up the way you liked it, this wing gave it really good pivot off the top. Again, I was riding these waves backside, so the snap off the top, once I had everything in the right place and the setup that I liked, the snap off the top was really noticeable and super fun. From a durability standpoint, there's a few different ways that you categorize durability on a board. You have ding durability, and then you also have breakage durability, breaking the board in half. And then the last is you have the flex pattern durability, how long the board retains its performance flex before it goes flat, like a flat snowboard or a flat set of skis, just like a wet noodle. This board, with regards to the first type of durability, the ding durability, that's where this board really stands out, in that from a travel aspect, and using this as a travel board, I didn't have to worry about it. And so whether I left my board out in the wrong place where some kid might run and jump on it on the beach, or if it was the bottom board on a boat trip and everything was getting tied down and levered, or somebody even sat on it, there's a much less worry as far as the board and getting a ding in it, or getting a crack in the rail than your standard PU poly. And so after 6 days down there, plus the plane flight there, the plane flight back, and the surfing here, there's still no dings in the board. There's no dents underneath the feet yet, and there's no dings on the bottom or on any of the edges. And I mean, already this board's been bounced off of a ladder. It's been bounced off a couple concrete corners. It's been dropped down on some hard surfaces. It's been levered in between boards like on a boat. So, and there's not any noticeable, actually not even noticeable, there aren't any dings in the board anywhere. So that was a huge peace of mind on a trip, especially a board that's going to be such a bread and butter board given the forecast that we had. And then from another standpoint, just having a board with some good range. And I think a lot of people consider this board a small wave only board, but in the waves that we had, again, it was a little bit slopier. You can ride this in some better conditions. The majority of the waves that we had were about waist to chest, shoulder, maybe a head high set once in a while, but on the bigger days of the week when we were there, there were some sets that were a foot overhead, and this thing would still hold on the drop, and then as the wave would kind of slope out a little bit more, being plenty in control. So that was actually surprising, because I mean, looking at the shape, you would consider it to be small wave only, but there is some taper in the rails, and then bringing that tail in does give it a little bit more control. I mean, obviously I wouldn't be taking it out if all the waves were in that size. I would step down to something narrower and just a sportier board. But having a board that can handle those sets, and then also obviously perform really well in the super small stuff is a great board. And then combine that with the durability, and then just the peace of mind that you're not going to be repairing your board the whole week that you're gone on your surf trip is a plus. So it's the LibTech Lost Puddle Jumper, great board. And again, before we leave, want to make sure in your toolbox you got the LibTech fin key. That's a big one. So check it out. It's got an orange head, It's a little bit bigger than the FCS, which is then again a little bit bigger than the Futures. The LibTech Lost Puddle Jumper. For more information, you can check out our website, realwatersports.com/surfing, or give us a call at the shop, 252-987-6000. Thanks for tuning in.